and look at that collaboration in a different way. All right, yeah.
So we've traveled, like Margaret said, from me to we to us to the client or customer or passenger. And this is, where it all lands, so to speak. We are all working so that the passenger has the best and safest experience possible. But like I mentioned before, there are really, when you look at all 1,800 of us, not all that many of us who have direct contact with a passenger every single day. That would be crew, that would be call center reservations agents, that would be station agents, a portion of the pilot's role, of course. But there are so many of us who, instead of the passenger as our ultimate client, have each other as our clients. We have a customer that is another department, team, or group. So it all kind of culminates in the client and customer as we move around the compass. So remember our journey from the survive to sustain mode, and all of those things that we had mentioned before, going from scrappy, getting the job done in survival mode, to having a small team, moving fast, things happening just in time, with solutions and remedies where you give each other a high five and say, woo, we made it through that one. To sustain. And wait, let me stop and say, this is especially the reason why we have agile innovation as a quadrant is because this is still important. We don't want to be dissing this or saying that this has no place.
I was going to say, in the airline business, a lot of that,
exactly.
You have to work that way. I mean, we have to
absolutely. And you should react that way. You have to.
But I would say that's not the message we're sending them, because we talk about going from to, and you corrected it here. But I think the message out there is, old Sun Country, the silos. A lot of that is perception of how they perceive what we're saying as far as silos and going from to. We need to better communicate what we're saying when we say from to to.
Yeah. So I will tell you that there's a place for this, but the place for this now is this happens within the context of a foundation. So when this needs to happen, when survive needs to happen, scrappy needs to happen, it's a portion. It's not how we live day in and day out. It's a response to something that has changed. Because the day in, day out foundation is the replicable, is the key. So this will always have a place, but it hopefully will not be our main mode of how we respond. And I'll give you an idea, in the quadrant in and of itself, you have to be agile because things change and things shift. And we have to be able to respond to that. That's that scrappiness, roll up your sleeves, get it done. But what we're striving for in sustain is that there is this foundation of boom, done again, boom, done again, boom, done again. And it is something that is solid. It's something that is predictable as possible, that checklist, that recipe, and when this happens, it's fewer and further between. It's fewer and further between of having the oh my gosh. Because if you're always getting things done in this way, I'll give you an example in the hotel industry. So in the hotel industry, and hopefully this translates, but in the hotel industry, you have a lot going on at one property and people don't see it, just like pushing an aircraft. People do not see it. If you are a guest who walks into a hotel room lobby, you have no idea what it took to clean that room. There are functions and events happening and people are turning ballrooms. There's food happening behind the scenes in the restaurant, food happening behind the scenes in catering. There's a lot going on. It's like a stage production, just like pushing an aircraft is a stage production. if you're in survival mode all the time and you don't have checklists and replicable processes, something is going to get missed. You know, something is going to happen, and for luckily in a hotel, that's a static building, and it does not mean that the same, you know, as an airline. For us, we lived here only for such a long period of time and got it done, which is fantastic. What we're hoping is that we have this foundation, and then that scrappiness, that getting the job done and rolling up your sleeves can then be utilized to make things even better. That space and time is there every single time to do things in a way that is the safest possible, like a checklist, for example, like a checklist. And I know it can't be that clean because things change all the time.
The complexity of being out in the operation, and these guys, Nate, you can contest it. I mean, we're constantly, something's happening.
Whether it's weather or
weather, it could
yeah.
be damage, it could be it could be anything, but it's constantly changing. We have to. You use scrappiness. I use reacting and making good judgment and getting the plane or whatever, the customer out on time and doing what we're supposed to do. I get the foundation. I get the document. You can't document everything.
Right.
In this industry, it's just too complex. You can have that foundation,
sure,
but you have to be able to react and using scrappiness and getting the job done. To me, I think there's people, we're misconstruing what you're saying when you're saying getting the job done. We all want to get the job done, but I think we're putting it into a negative way that in the past, that's all we did is just get it done and didn't follow a foundation or repeatable processes. They were repeatable processes, and there were documented procedures. So, that's it.
I hear what you're saying. I also heard you say the word react,
Yeah.
and that brings my shackles up a little bit because, and I'll say why. I'll say you should be responding in a foundation that is proactive, not reactive. So you can never predict things like weather. You can never predict things like damage. You can never predict things like, I mean, let's face it, I read that daily report every day. I'm shocked at the amount of passengers who become ill on a flight. Or, I mean, there are things you cannot predict and you have to respond to. And I think you need to respond to them. Okay, you need to
That's just like
yeah. And so it will always be a place for this, and it's incredibly important. We're not trying to have this go away. Here is where the proactive foundation of response comes from. It stems from this piece. Understanding that you have the foundation there to have the space to respond to the crises. The most basic example, how many of you are familiar, if any of you are familiar with the model called Maslow's hierarchy of needs? It's a pyramid shape, and the reason it's a pyramid shape is because you will spend the most amount of energy, time, or anything in order to get your needs met on the bottom. So Maslow's hierarchy of needs, I'll explain this very, very simply and in only 3 tiers. You will do anything for air, water, and food. You will expend every ounce of energy you have for air, water, and food. Once you have air, water, and food, you next are looking for things like safety and belonging. So you'd want like a home, a family, things like that. And you'll expend some energy, that's the middle of the pyramid, for that. But if all of a sudden, you know, the air or food is taken away, you go back down, all the way back down, because you need the air, food, and water. But once you have the home and the family, that sense of belonging, and you have plenty of food, air, and water, then you go all the way to the top to things closer to self-actualization. Like maybe you start a hobby, take up playing the guitar, or keep a journal, those kinds of things. Those are luxuries, absolute luxuries in existence. They're not a need by any stretch of the imagination, but they're a need that you can accommodate because you have all of those other things. You know, that's kind of the model we're talking about as leadership when we talk about let's have things be repeatable, documented, foundational, proactive within the response of being able to, because you're right, you cannot predict what's going to happen next. But if you can't predict what's going to happen next and you also don't have the foundation of the food, water, then you're really in trouble. Then you're really in trouble. And let's face it, Sun Country Airlines has had times where we haven't had food, water, and air. When we were asking people to work at, 50% of their paycheck. When people were coming to work every day saying, I wonder when I get there if I'll have a job. And you certainly couldn't ask for resources because the resources it just wasn't possible. So, the model overall is, we've been here and it was really rough. We don't want to go back down that pyramid. We don't want to drop back. That's the only, message in the journey. That's the only way to remain and sustain, is to have that foundation there. And we will definitely never get to thrive without the foundation. It's not possible. It's part of the definition of thrive. Part of the definition of being able to take guitar lessons or keep a journal or have children is that you have a home for them to sleep in, that you have a sense of belonging, that you have food, that you have air, that you have water. No different for an organization, an organism or an organization. But it will always be valuable to be scrappy when you're having to respond to things that cannot be predicted. So that's that journey. And one of the key things in that journey is making absolutely sure you can trust that we're very, very dedicated to staying in sustain mode and moving toward thrive. And one of my favorite, we don't know if this will work or not right now, one of my favorite leadership gurus is a man named Simon Sinek, S-I-N-E-K. He is more a philosopher than a lecturer. And here's an example of how he talks about how trust in a culture.
Let's suppose that you're writing a really important email to a colleague.
But first an ad.
Or a post on
Yeah.